something you've never seen before.
Whoa. I might cry.
I'm turning Phineas and Ferb characters into their opposites. Here's how it works. Let's use Jeremy as an example.
Feels like by the time my shift is over, I'll be a part of the fossil exhibit.
We will take each character and list out their 3 key attributes and 3 key colors. We will then swap those to their opposites, place the character into our art robot Creg, along with the opposite attributes and color list. Then Creg will print out the new opposite version of that character. And Creg will bring each character to life to see how the character would affect the storyline of the show. Let's start with the star of the show, Phineas. Alright Creg, what are Phineas's key attributes and colors?
Phineas is an inventive visionary, an optimistic leader, and full of endless energy. But if he were his opposite, he'd be totally uninspired, always complaining, and a total couch potato. His key colors come from his bright orange shirt, red hair, and dark blue eyes. And the opposite of those would be a dull blue shirt, green hair, and light orange eyes.
Okay, Creg, using these opposite attributes and opposite colors, turn Phineas into his opposite. Let's see what the opposite Phineas would look like. This is actually kind of insane because it's definitely so much sadder than the original show. Like, one of the only reasons I like the show Phineas and Ferb is because of how bright and hopeful it is, and this is just sad. But very accurate. Good job, Creg. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Phineas to life to see how he would affect the storyline of the show.
If Phineas were totally uninspired, he'd skip all those wild inventions and just scroll his phone all day. If he were always complaining, he'd bring the vibe down every time someone had an idea. And if he were a couch potato, you can forget building roller coasters. He'd be binge-watching cartoons in his PJs.
Yeah, so this opposite is so much different than the Phineas we know because he's just rude and he seems like he doesn't really want to do anything, and he would look down upon building anything because he just wants to be in his bed. He wants to be watching something. He's not really creative. Now let's move on to rating the character. To start it off, I'm going to give you an 8.5 out of 10. Now it's time to add the first character to the poster. There he is, first character on the poster. Now let's move on. Next up is another star in the show, Isabella. Alright Creg, what are Isabella's key attributes and colors?
Isabella is a sweetheart scout, a fearless go-getter, and a ride-or-die friend. But if she were her opposite, she'd be petty and rude, scared of everything, and a total backstabber. Her key colors come from her purple dress, black hair, and dark blue eyes. And the opposite of those would be a yellow dress, white hair, and light orange eyes.
Alrighty Creg, now using those opposite attributes and opposite colors, turn Isabella into her opposite. The sweet Isabella turned into the not so sweet Isabella. Let's see what that would look like. This is actually insane because it seems like she's wearing yellow and behind her is one of Phineas and Ferb's creations, and what I'm thinking is she ruined it for them and she messed it up, and that's her backstabbing ability. I love the Isabella from the show. She seemed like such a nice friend, but this is just, it's not it. But it is kind of interesting to see. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Isabella to life.
If Isabella were petty and rude, she wouldn't care about helping anyone earn a patch. She'd make fun of their outfits instead. If she was scared of everything, there'd be no brave missions or big entrances, just hiding behind bushes. And if she were a total backstabber, let's just say Phineas better watch his back.
Wow, this Isabella, you do not want to get on her bad side. Phineas and Ferb better watch their back. This honestly would be interesting to see in the show. It would make the show very, very interesting, but also kind of annoying. I like the original Isabella. Now it's time to move on to rating the character. So I'm going to be giving this one a 7.5 out of 10. Creg, put the opposite Isabella on our poster. There she is, right next to Phineas on the poster, and Phineas, you better watch out. Character number 3 is one of the coolest characters, Ferb. Alright Creg, what are Ferb's key attributes and colors?
Ferb is a silent genius, a mechanical mastermind, and always cool and collected. But if he were his opposite, he wouldn't stop talking. He'd be constantly confused and uncontrollably hyper. His key colors come from his purple overalls, green hair, and blue eyes. And the opposite of those would be yellow clothes, red hair, and bright orange eyes.
Okay, Creg, now using those opposite attributes and colors, turn a Ferb into his opposite. Opposite Ferb. Let's see what that looks like. This one is actually pretty insane. Ferb being a really talkative one, I can see that. I can see how his like machine behind him is not working, so him being like hyper and anxious and him talking and like making an excuse for it maybe. He's wearing all yellow, his hair is red, and yeah, this is pretty accurate. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Ferb to life.
If Ferb couldn't stop talking, he'd interrupt every blueprint plan with nonsense. If he were always confused, the inventions would fall apart before they even start. And if he were uncontrollably hyper, good luck keeping him focused long enough to build anything.
Yeah, this Ferb does not seem like that much fun to hang around because I feel like Phineas and his dynamic would like change completely because the normal Ferb was like so good at building stuff and he didn't talk at all and it was kind of like a duo kind of thing. So this one would, I think it would ruin it. Now it's time to move on to the rating of the character. So I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Creg, go ahead and put the opposite Ferb onto our poster. There he is, guys. Ferb made it to the poster, and it looks pretty good. Next up is my favorite character, Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Alright, Creg, what are Dr. Doof's key attributes and colors?
Dr. Doofenshmirtz is the wild idea guy, full of dramatic villain energy and never quits, no matter how badly it goes. But if he were his opposite, he'd be a blank slate thinker, have a snorefest personality, and give up instantly. His key colors come from his white lab coat, brown hair, and blue eyes, and the opposite of those would be a black coat, blue hair, and orange eyes.
Now, Creg, using those opposite attributes and opposite color, turn Dr. Doofenshmirtz, my favorite character, into his opposite. This one is the one I'm most looking forward to. This version of Doofenshmirtz is definitely not the normal one. He seems much more like bored. He looks like he's like giving up on a project. He's like depressed and sad. I loved the normal version in the show, but this character, it's just not the same anymore. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Doofenshmirtz to life.
If Doof was a blank slate thinker, there'd be no crazy inventions, just a confused stare. If he had a snorefest personality, Perry would probably fall asleep during their battles. And if he gave up instantly, he'd quit the villain life after one failed evil laugh.
This character's personality would not add much to the show. I feel like if he was in the show, I would just skip over his part every time it came on. So yeah, this is not very good. The original Doofenshmirtz was the best person in the show, and this might be the worst person in the opposite show. Now it's time to move on to the rating of the character. So I'm gonna give this one a 9 out of 10. Creg, go ahead and add the opposite Doofenshmirtz to the poster. Now that's 4 opposite characters on the poster. Let's move on. Real quick, guys. If you like my content and watch videos on my channel, please subscribe. Every new subscriber encourages me to make new videos. I love you guys. Back to the video. Next up is Buford. Alright, Creg, what are Buford's key attributes and colors?
Buford is the king of tough guy vibes, bursting with big confidence and, surprisingly, fiercely loyal. But if he were his opposite, he'd be jumpy and nervous, awkward and unsure, and totally flaky when it counts. His key colors come from his black shirt, dark brown hair, and brown eyes, and the opposite version of those would be a white shirt, light blue hair, and light blue eyes.
Okay, Creg, now using those opposite attributes and colors, turn a big Buford into his opposite. This one's gonna be very interesting. This one is definitely very odd. He definitely doesn't look like the big, strong, like buff bully like he usually is. He is wearing lighter clothes, his eyes and hair is lighter. It's definitely very good. And now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Buford to life.
If Buford were jumpy and nervous, he'd flinch every time Baljet sneezed. If he were awkward and unsure, he'd mumble through every comeback. And if he were flaky and unreliable, no more standing up for his friends. He'd bail the second things get tough.
Buford was such a good character in the show. I think it was just because he kept it grounded. But this one, no, not so much. And now it's time to move on to the rating of the character. So I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Creg, add opposite Buford to the poster. 5 opposite characters made it to the poster. Let's move on to number 6. Next up is Baljet. Alright, Creg, what are Baljet's key attributes and colors?
Baljet is a straight A rule follower, always stressed and basically a walking math machine. But if he were his opposite, he'd be a clueless rebel, an unbothered cool guy, and way too cool for homework. His key colors come from his blue shirt, black hair, and brown eyes. And the opposite of those would be an orange shirt, white hair, and light blue eyes.
Alright, Creg, now using those opposite attributes and opposite color, turn the nerdy Baljet into his opposite. I don't really like this one because he doesn't look really cool. He doesn't look like a cool guy. I don't like this one very much. It looks like the old Baljet. All the colors are right, but the attributes just aren't hitting. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Baljet to life.
If Baljet were a clueless rebel, he'd forget his homework and say, rules are for chumps. If he were unbothered and cool, he wouldn't stress over A's, he'd wing every test. And if he were too cool for homework, that mathlete life would be a distant memory.
Okay, so seeing him interact shows his attributes a little bit better, but it just doesn't show that much for me. So I think Creg could have done a little better. I still love you, Creg, though. Now let's move on to the rating of the character. So I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 10. Creg, add opposite Baljet to the poster. There it is, 6 characters, and now let's move on. Next up is Perry the Platypus, Agent P to those in the know. Another one of my favorites. He also just carried the whole show, so. Alright, Creg, what are Perry's key attributes and colors?
Perry is a top-secret agent, a fearless fighter, and a furry force for good. But if he were his opposite, he'd be a super obvious villain, jump at loud noises, and be evil in a fedora. His key colors come from his brown fedora, teal hair, and brown eyes, and the opposite of those would be a blue fedora, orange hair, and bright blue eyes.
Alright, Creg, now using those opposite attributes and opposite colors, turn the sneaky little Perry into his opposite. This one's gonna be a fun one. This one is actually pretty insane. He does look very evil and like he's up to no good, and honestly, it's kind of scary. He looks like the evil Lorax without a mustache and a fedora. But yeah, this is definitely an interesting take on evil Perry the Platypus. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Perry to life.
If Perry were a super obvious villain, he'd strut into Doof's lair with neon signs pointing at him. If he jumped at loud noises, he'd panic every time a trap snapped. And if he were evil in a fedora, he'd ditch saving the tri-state area and start building a lair of his own.
Yeah, this version of Perry the Platypus would have changed the storyline of Phineas and Ferb completely. But it might be an interesting show, honestly. There was that one episode where Perry did turn evil, and that was a pretty good episode the way it was put. But overall, I think the show does need good Agent P. Now it's time to move on to the ranking of the character. So I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Creg, go ahead and add opposite Agent P to the poster. That's 7, and this is looking pretty good. We have one more to go. Last but definitely not least is Candace Flynn. Okay, Creg, what are Candace's key attributes and colors?
Candace is obsessed with bustin', a total drama queen, and always trying to bust her brothers. But if she were her opposite, she'd have zero interest in snitching, be too chill to care, and actually build with her brothers. Her key colors come from her red outfit, orange hair, and blue eyes. And the opposite of those would be a green outfit, blue hair, and orange eyes.
Alright, Creg, now using these opposite attributes and colors, can you turn Candace, one of the best characters, into her opposite? I am really excited for this one. Honestly, this is pretty crazy because opposite Candace seems like a pretty cool sister. Like, she'll build with you, she'll chill, and then she won't like tell mom. I think she sounds pretty cool. Creg, I think you nailed it. Now it's time for Creg to bring the opposite Candace to life.
If Candace had zero interest in snitching, she'd scroll past her brother's chaos like it's no big deal. If she were too chill to care, there'd be no yelling, no chasing, just vibes. And if she helped build with her brothers, yeah, Mom might actually catch them for once.
Okay, I could see that, and I think it might be honestly kind of cool to see what one episode of this opposite Candace would look like. I like this one. Now it's time to move on to the ranking of the character. So I'm gonna give opposite Candace a 10 out of 10. Creg, finish the poster by adding opposite Candace. Guys, the poster's done and it looks awesome. If you liked it, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you at the next fun video.